Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's YunKs. Today, I'll be showing you guys Outbreak Prime, the Wrath of the Machine exotic pulse rifle. Anyway, let's just quickly go over the perks that are on this thing. So we have the corruption spreads. Enemies that take repeated hits from this weapon will spawn Siva nanites that attack other enemies and fall and take extra damage. Smooth ballistics is the sight I run. We have outlaw. In the middle, we have lightweight, hand-loaded, and fitted stock. I run fitted stock for the increased stability, and for the last perk here, Virulence. Precision kills release a Siva nanite swarm that attacks other enemies. Alright, very unique. Now before we get into it, I do want to mention this is an in-between pulse rifle, same archetype as a Bad Juju or Hawksaw. Anyway, let's just get right into the gameplay. So, Outbreak Prime versus the Ultra for the DPS test. It took me 58 shots to put him down, having to reload once, that reload clocking in at about 2 seconds long, each headshot dealing 513 damage, and there are 3 shots in each burst, so each burst in total dealing 1,539 damage, and it took me 9.6 seconds to kill him. And on the 4th burst with Outbreak Prime, as long as you're hitting the same enemy over and over, that's when you're going to release your nanites. And against the Ultra Knight, the nanites were dealing an extra 64 damage, so I guess a little extra damage never hurts. Now let's just quickly and briefly go over PvE with the Outbreak Prime. Well, it's pretty much just a beast. We're moving right... No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go over it a little more in detail. So... Alright, so Outbreak Prime against lower tier enemies is always a wonderful thing because that Virulence perk will constantly come into play, releasing those Siva swarms, and if you shoot an enemy coming out of a doorway and they have a whole bunch of other enemies behind them coming out, you'll have that Siva swarm to attack just pretty much all of them constantly, and as long as you keep shooting them, they almost have no chance. And Outbreak Prime also works very well against bosses because of the Corruption Spread perk. Like I said, on every 4th burst you will release nanites, so using Outbreak Prime in PvE, you're pretty much going to have constant nanites a majority of the time. As long as you're shooting enemies, as long as you're getting headshot kills, you're going to spawn a ton of nanites with Outbreak Prime throughout your activities, and the more nanites you spawn equals the more damage you're going to deal, the more extra damage you're going to deal, and extra damage, like I said, never hurts, so this would be a pretty solid choice if you want your primary to deal some potent damage, whether to a boss or to lower tier enemies. Plus you have the extra fallen damage with the corruption spread, so a good choice for a lot of Rise of Iron activities. Just an overall solid primary exotic weapon, that is for sure. This thing was definitely made for PvE. There is no doubt about that. Anyway, we're moving right along into PvP, and you guys are probably thinking, what the hell do the nanites do in PvP? They shred in PvE, so how much damage do they deal exactly against Guardians in the Crucible? Well, there's a swarm. 4 damage.
Dude, they did nothing to me.
Yup, that is correct. A whopping 4 damage from the nanites from the corruption spreads, the 4 bursts on an enemy to release the nanites, and he was using blessings just so I wouldn't kill him with those 4 bursts. We also did test the Virulence perk, you know, the precision kills to release the Siva nanite swarm. Let's see if that is any different. Still 4 damage, but you do get a lot more nanites, but it still doesn't do significant damage. I mean, if the enemy is already weak and they walk into that, you know, it could kill them depending on how weak they are. But for the most part, this isn't gonna come into play very often. The Virulence, and especially the Corruption Spread. The only way Corruption Spread will come into play is if you're shooting somebody with an overshield or somebody in their super or something like that. And the reason for that is Outbreak Prime will kill an enemy with 4 bursts of even if all your shots are body shots. So it will not spawn the nanites if the enemy does die, and you do have to land full burst in order to spawn the nanites. For the most part, you will rarely see this come into play. Virulence will come into play a little more often, but still not so often where it's going to make a significant impact on the game. You do have to get that headshot kill, then another enemy has to walk into it shortly afterward. This can work well if there is a group of enemies and you do happen to get a headshot kill in that group and the Siva swarms attack everybody. I mean, that could definitely be good, but how often are you going to have a situation like that, and how effective would these swarms be in that situation? I don't know. I couldn't really tell you. When I was getting footage for my Outbreak Prime, I may have only had 1 or 2 scenarios where a nanite did damage to another enemy. That's really it, and it wasn't anything crazy. It didn't deal much damage. It wasn't significant. So for anybody saying this weapon is OP in the Crucible and should be nerfed, well, I pretty much would disagree personally. I really don't think it's all that big a deal. If somebody on the enemy team is running Outbreak Prime, I don't think you have to worry too much about the nanites themselves. They are pretty easily avoidable. Just stay away from the person that's getting killed to death by Outbreak Prime. That's really all. And as for the gun itself, it's pretty decent though. It'll deal 75 damage per burst to the head and 51 per burst to the enemy's body. So it'll take 2 bursts and 2 bullets in order to kill your enemy if all your shots are headshots, or it'll take 4 full bursts to kill somebody if all your shots are body shots. It could also take 2 bursts to the head and 1 burst to the body in order to put your enemy down. Individually, these bullets will deal 25 damage to the head and 17 to the body. What is the time to kill on Outbreak Prime? Well, let's say it takes 3 bursts to kill your enemy. It'll take 0.9 seconds. Not too bad. Anyway, guys, go ahead and leave in the comments, do you have an Outbreak Prime? And if you do, what do you think of it? And do you use it in the Crucible? Let me know. Overall, I had a great time with this weapon, although the actual special exotic perks themselves didn't really come into play. The weapon itself did perform pretty well, however. It has pretty good stability, especially with fitted stock on it. It doesn't really move all that much. It does have a tiny little kick, but it's easily controllable. I think Outbreak Prime does have potential in the Crucible as being a solid pulse rifle, but of course, any primary could get the job done. A Hawksaw could get the job done without using the exotic slot. So is it worth the exotic slot when it comes to PvP? Well, that's really up to you and how you feel with using Outbreak Prime. All in all, like I said, still a solid pulse rifle for the Crucible, and it can be effective in many ways when it comes to PvE. Outbreak Prime was certainly made for PvE. Anyway, I think that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the video, and go ahead and leave us up if you haven't already if you want to see more weapon reviews similar to this one. I'm always covering weapons here in Destiny. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time.